Hello friends, so let's study about different methods of EIA or the different methods with the help of which you can assess the impacts of the developmental projects on the environment. So the methods which I'll be covering are checklist method, Ad-hoc method, environmental media quality index method, cost benefit analysis, metrics and network method. So first one is Ad-hoc method. Ad-hoc method. Now, this method is a preliminary approach used to assess the potential environmental impacts of the development project. It involves identifying and listing the various composite environmental parameters such as flora, fauna, air and water quality, soil, noise levels, and socio-economic factors that are likely to be affected by the proposed developments. Like in case of flora and fauna, you will see what impacts will be on local ecosystems, on biodiversity, habitat change will be there, wildlife disruption. In case of air and water quality, like change in the pollutant levels, potential contamination. Then coming to soil, like how composition of soil will change with the development of the project and so on. In order to implement this method, a team of specialists from relevant fields is assembled. Each specialist focus on their area of expertise such as air quality, water quality, biodiversity, etc. They analyze the potential impacts on their respective areas and consider factors like the duration of impact, maybe short-term impact or long-term impact, and whether the impact is reversible or irreversible. Now, the purpose of this method is to provide rough assessment of the overall impact of the development project. By examining each environmental area separately, the method aims to identify the broad areas of possible impacts and the general nature of these impacts. It helps in understanding the potential environmental consequences and facilitates the decision making regarding the project. Now this method, it mainly relies on the intuitive approach, means the assessor or the expert, they use their knowledge and experience to evaluate the potential impacts. This approach is subjective and relies heavily on the intuition and expertise of the assessor. Rather than detailed quantitative analysis, the focus in this method is on general overall assessment of the impacts. So, as we already discussed, this method involves assembling a team of specialists who possess expertise in various environmental areas to identify the impacts within their respective fields. Now, the key characteristics and the parameters which are to be considered in this method are: first, separate assessment of environmental areas. The method involves evaluating each environmental area separately, such as air, water, flora, fauna, and social characteristics. This allows for a focused analysis of the potential impacts within each specific domain. Second, nature of impacts. The method considers the nature of impacts, including whether they are short-term, long-term, reversible, or irreversible. This helps in understanding the duration and permanence of the potential impacts. Third is qualitative assessment. This method relies on a qualitative assessment approach, utilizing the expertise and intuition of the assessors. Fourth, identification of broad areas of possible impacts. The primary goal of this method is to identify the broad areas where impacts are likely to occur. This includes aspects such as wildlife, natural drainage, recreation, endangered species, natural vegetation, exotic vegetation, grazing, social characteristics, groundwater, noise, air quality, water quality, and many more. Fifth, preliminary assessment. This method serves as a preliminary assessment to provide a general understanding of the potential impacts. It helps in identifying key areas that may require further detailed assessment or mitigation measures. This is a simple method and based upon the broad environmental impacts aspects. Now this method, it will be very useful when you have limited amount of time, when you are having time constraints and you don't have the scientific information which is required in order to assess the impacts. In that case, this method will be very useful. In such situation, EIA, it depends exclusively on background, expertise and experience of the experts. As I said that it relies on intuitive approach. Means it relies on the subjective judgments, expert opinions and non-numerical information. Instead of using precise measurements, this approach focuses on understanding and describing the qualities, characteristics, and relationship of the subject being assessed. It totally relies on the professional judgment of the assessor and experience to evaluate the nature, significance, and likelihood of the impacts. Now, this method is not recommended in the case when you have more better scientific methods available with you. So this is the example of Ad-hoc method. Now in this you can see on the left side the impact areas are given. Means it will list various environmental parameters or impact areas such as wildlife, endangered species, natural vegetation and many more. Means if the project is constructed at a particular place, it will have impact on the environmental parameters. So those environmental parameters are listed at this site. Then on the other side, nature of impacts are written. Adverse impact, beneficial, problematic, and so on. Adverse effect, it will be there if the negative effects on the environment would be there. Then beneficial effects, if positive effects on the environment will be there. Problematic, areas where impacts are uncertain or challenging to manage. Short term means immediate or temporary effects. Long term, lasting or permanent effects. Then reversible means the impacts that can be mitigated or reversed over the time. Irreversible, permanent impacts that cannot be undone. Now you can see the asterisks are given. It is given wherever the presence of impacts are there in the corresponding categories. For example, if the project is constructed, what impact it will have on wildlife? So it will have long-term and reversible impact. Wherever this asterisks are there means over there impacts are present. Like in case of endangered species, what impact it will have on endangered species, long-term as well as reversible. So the ad hoc method, there are further three types. First, opinion poll, second, expert opinion, and third is Delphi method. Opinion poll method. So in this method, it involves conducting surveys or interviews to gather public opinions and perspectives on specific topics related to environmental impacts. This method seeks to capture the views, beliefs, experiences, and attitudes of the general public regarding environmental issues associated with the proposed project or activity. The general public's input is valuable as it reflects their personal experiences, beliefs, and attitude towards the environment. So, how it works? Starting with the survey or interview design, designing structured surveys or interview protocols to systematically gather opinions from a respective sample of the population. Surveys may include the questions about the environmental impacts of the project, like what impacts the project will have if it will be set up at a particular place, concerns about the potential risks, preferences for mitigation measures, and overall support or opposition. Then public participation. Then you will engage a diverse cross-section of the public to ensure a comprehensive range of opinions. This may involve reaching out to stakeholders, community members, local residents, environmental groups, and other relevant parties. Then after that, you will collect data, conducting surveys or interviews to collect quantitative and qualitative data on public perceptions and attitudes towards the proposed project or activity and its potential environmental impacts. Now you have data. Now the thing is you have to analyze the collected data to identify the common themes, concerns, priorities, and preferences among the public. Then results are typically reported in a structured manner, highlighting the key findings and insights. By incorporating the public opinions, decision makers they can consider a broad range of viewpoints and concerns that may not be apparent through technical assessments alone. This enhances the overall assessment process and promotes transparency and accountability. Expert opinion method. Now this method it involves gathering insights and assessments from the specialists in specific fields to evaluate the potential impacts of a project or activity on the environment. These experts they contribute their knowledge and expertise to provide informed perspectives that guide decision making processes in various domains. Now, these experts they possess deep knowledge and expertise in their respective fields like ecology, hydrology, air quality, social sciences, environmental science. This specialized knowledge allows them to understand complex interactions and predict potential outcomes related to environmental impacts. Based on their expertise, experts can assess the potential environmental impacts of a proposed project or activity. They consider factors such as ecological sensitivity, hydrological changes, air pollution effects, social implications, and more, providing a comprehensive analysis of potential risks and benefits. Expert opinions play a crucial role in decision-making decision-making processes related to project planning, development, environmental management. Decision makers rely on these opinions to understand the implications of their choices and to make informed decisions that will balance economic, social, and environmental considerations. Often experts from different disciplines they collaborate to provide a holistic assessment. This interdisciplinary approach ensures that various aspects of environmental impacts are thoroughly evaluated considering the interconnectedness of natural and human systems. Delphi method. Now, this is a method of collecting opinions from different expertise by building different methods to minimize the various negative attributes of other opinion gathering methods. So this method, Delphi method, it is an iterative technique. Iterative means the process which involves repeating a sequence of steps or actions multiple times, typically with adjustments or refinements made in each cycle based on the previous outcomes or feedback. So here are some additional features and benefits of Delphi method. First is handling a large number of opinion givers. The Delphi method can effectively handle a large number of participants as compared to the traditional expert panels or brainstorming sessions. By utilizing a structured and iterative approach, it allows for inclusion of a broader range of perspectives and expertise, ensuring a comprehensive and diverse set of opinions. Second is anonymity and equal participation. This method offers anonymity to participants, meaning that their identities and opinions are kept confidential. Now, this helps create an equal playing field and reduces biases associated with dominant personalities or influential individuals in the group. Anonymity encourages all the participants to freely express their opinions without fear of repercussions or judgment. Third is iterative feedback and consensus building. This method involves multiple rounds of data collection and feedback. In each round, the participants they are provided with summaries of the group's opinions, allowing them to reconsider and refine their own opinions based on the collective input. This iterative process fosters consensus building and convergence of opinions over the time. Fourth is dynamic model development. This method can be used to collect opinions and information that can be incorporated into dynamic models. These models can simulate and forecast the impacts of various scenarios, helping the decision makers understand the potential outcomes and make informed choices. By combining expert opinions with dynamic modeling, the Delphi method enables a more comprehensive and informed decision-making process. Okay, so now what is the procedure for this Delphi method? So first is structured questionnaire. A structured, formal and detailed questionnaire is developed by the Delphi organizer. Now this questionnaire is distributed to the participants either by mail or in person, depending on the logistics and preferences. Second is data collection and analysis. The organizer collects the responses from the participants and analyzes them. This analysis may involve combining, averaging, or summarizing the responses, often using statistical methods to identify the patterns or trends. Then third is presentation of averaged responses. The averaged responses are presented to the participants in second round of the Delphi process. The participants are provided with feedback on the group's aggregated responses, allowing them to consider the collective opinions. Then fourth is modified questionnaire. Based on the results and feedbacks from the first round, the questionnaire for the second round may be modified if it is required. This ensures that the subsequent rounds address any gaps or inconsistencies in the opinions gathered. Fifth is justification of response. In the subsequent rounds, participants may be asked to provide justifications or explanation for their responses, just to check out if they have given their responses themselves by or if they are being dominated by any other personalities. Now this allows for deeper insights into the underlying reasoning and facilitates a more comprehensive understanding of the diverse opinions. Then last is continued interactions. Further interactions and rounds of the Delphi process may be conducted if necessary to achieve convergence of opinions, means to achieve at a single opinion. The process continues until a consensus or convergence of opinions emerges, not through force but through the voluntary alignment of views. Means it will continue until all of the people they will converge to the one decision. Advantages of Ad-hoc method. This method is quite simple. It is straightforward and can be performed without any specialized training. It have minimal complexity. It does not require complex analytical tools or detailed procedures, making it accessible to a wide range of practitioners. Then there is no need for weighting or cause-effect analysis, as this method does not involve assigning relative weights to different impacts or establishing detailed cause-effect relationships. It allows for a direct and immediate assessment of potential impacts without the need for intricate calculation or models. Then it have holistic approach. It considers each environmental area separately, ensuring that all the potential impacts are identified and evaluated. It provides a broad overview of the total impacts of the project, encompassing various environmental parameters. The method also involves assembling a team of specialists who contribute their expertise to identify and evaluate impacts in their respective areas, and expert opinions provide reliable and informed insights into potential environmental consequences. Then is its speed and cost effectiveness. This process can be conducted quickly, allowing for timely identification of impacts. And it is a cost-effective approach as it does not require extensive resources or prolonged study periods. Then there are certain drawbacks associated with it. First is lack of comprehensive coverage. This method provides no assurance that all the relevant impacts have been studied comprehensively. Important impacts might be overlooked, leading to the incomplete assessment. Then is inconsistency in analysis. Different groups may evaluate different criteria selectively, leading to variations in the assessment process. Without a standardized framework, the results can be inconsistent and subjective, depending on the perspectives and expertise of the individual assessors. And this process also requires considerable effort to identify and assemble the panel of specialists for each assessment. So it is effort intensive as well, and it is resource demanding also. The need to gather experts for every new assessment, it can be time consuming and resource intensive, reducing the overall efficiency. Next is checklist method of EIA. Checklist method of EIA. Now this method, it consists of standard lists that enumerate the types of impacts typically associated with a particular type of project. They provide a structured way to identify and evaluate potential environmental impacts. It is primarily used to organize the information systematically, and it also ensures the comprehensive coverage by listing all the potential impacts, thus preventing any significant aspect from being missed. And it is more formalized version of ad hoc approaches, like specific areas of impacts are listed and the detailed instructions are also supplied for its identification and evaluation. Means how you will assess impact of the project, for that you will be given instructions. A typical checklist for an EIA might include entries such as water. Like in case of water, there are two water sources: surface water sources, groundwater sources. So how the project which will be set up, it will have impact on the surface water sources like rivers, lakes, reservoirs and all, and how it will change the groundwater quality. Likewise, atmosphere means how level of gases and particles will change in air quality, then how climate patterns will change, how temperature variations will occur. Likewise, other entries are also there. There are 5 different types of checklists. First is simple checklist, second is descriptive checklist, third is scaling, fourth is scaling weighing checklist, and fifth is questionnaire checklist. Simple checklist includes a list of potential environmental parameters or factors that could be impacted by the project. Examples of parameters might include air quality, water quality, soil erosion, noise levels, wildlife habitat, etc. This checklist does not offer instructions on how to interpret the significance or severity of the impacts on these parameters. Users, they must rely on their own judgment of or additional resources to understand the implication of changes in these parameters. Means you will be given no instructions. Then this checklist, it does not provide methods or guidelines for measuring impact on each parameters. Then users must determine the appropriate metrics and methods for quantifying the impacts independently. So this is the example of simple checklist. Now this is a simple checklist which is developed for the Husai Thale Noi road project. Now the checklist, it is divided into 2 main sections: adverse impacts and beneficial impacts. Each section further categorizes the impacts based on various criteria. So first of all, under the section of this items, you can see this column lists the environmental components and factors that may be affected by the project. So in this example, the items include aquatic ecosystems, fisheries, forests, terrestrial wildlife, rare and endangered species, and so on. Then under the nature of likely impacts, the section, it is divided into adverse impacts and the beneficial impacts. Adverse impacts further divided into ST, short term, indicates impacts that are temporary and expected to occur during the construction or initial phase of the project. Then LT, long term, indicates impacts that are expected to persist over a longer duration even after the project is completed. Then is reversible, indicates impacts that can be reversed or mitigated over time. Irreversible indicates impacts that are permanent and cannot be mitigated. L, local, indicates impacts that are confined to a specific area. Wide indicate impacts that have a broader, more widespread effect. So, for example, in case of so wherever you will see the cross mark, it means the impact is expected over there. So in case of aquatic ecosystems, you can see it is expected to have long-term, irreversible, and local adverse effect, and no significant beneficial impacts are indicated. Likewise, in case of fisheries, adverse effects are expected, which would be long-term, irreversible, and local. Again, no significant beneficial effects will be there. Descriptive checklists are the more advanced version of simple checklists used in EIA. In this checklist method, detailed instructions are provided on how to measure data related to each environmental parameter. These guidelines help ensure that data collection is consistent, accurate, and reliable. This checklist method includes guidance on how to assess the impacts on each parameter. It outlines the data requirements, information sources, and predictive techniques that should be used. So this is example of descriptive checklist. So as I discussed in previous slide, that in this checklist you will be given guidance how to measure the data. From the example you can see here you require data on nuisance like change in occurrence of odor, smoke, haze, etc. and number of people affected. So you need not think from where you have to get this data. It will be given in the checklist. Like you can get information or data from the expected industrial processes, traffic volume, citizen surveys. Means the guidelines will be given in front of the data which is required, like how you can procure that data. Like you require data on water quality, you can get data from current water quality, current and expected effluents. So in simple checklist, you were not given any sort of guidelines how to measure the data about the environmental parameters. In descriptive checklist, you were given guidelines how to measure data. In scaling checklist, you will be given guidelines as well as subjective scaling or rating system to evaluate the significance of impacts. So the scaling checklists, they are extension of descriptive checklists used in EIA. They not only identify environmental parameters and provide guidelines on how to measure these parameters, but they also incorporate a subjective scaling or rating system to evaluate the significance of the impacts. So this involves assigning a numerical value to the impact, often on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, where the higher value it will indicate greater impact or better conditions. So in simple checklist, you were given no guidelines how to measure the environmental parameters. In descriptive checklist, you were given guidelines how to measure the environmental parameters. In scaling checklist, you will be given guidelines as well as scaling or rating system also will be given here. So scaling checklists, they are basically extension of descriptive checklists used in EI. They not only identify environmental parameters and provide guidelines on how to measure these parameters, but also incorporate a subjective scaling or rating system to evaluate the significance of the impacts. This involves assigning a numerical value to the impact, often on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, where the higher values, they indicate better conditions. For example, if the scale is of 1 to 5, 5 will be the best and 1 will be for the worst. So let's understand with the help of example. So the provided example, it uses a scaling checklist to evaluate the impact of project on several factors like habitat, quality, species, size or abundance, duration and magnitude. So beneficial impact scale, you can see 1, 2, 3. If the impact will be low, you will assign value 1. If impact will be medium, 2. And if impact will be high, you will assign value 3. So first of all, let's understand from this habitat quality. If the project improves the habitat quality significantly, you might assign a 3 under the beneficial impact column. Conversely, if the project degrades the habitat, you might assign a 3 under the adverse impact column. Species: if the project benefits certain species, increasing their population or health, you might assign a 2 under the beneficial impact column. If it negatively affects species diversity, you might assign 2 under the adverse impact column. Likewise, in case of duration, consider the duration of the impact. Short-term benefits might be rated as 1, whereas long-term benefits might be rated as 3. Scaling weighting checklist. Now, this represents scaling checklists with information provides as to subjective evaluation of each parameter with respect to every other parameter. Like scaling checklists, this checklist involves subjective evaluation of each environmental parameter. Parameters are rated or scaled individually based on their impact severity. In addition to individual ratings, the checklist includes information on the relative importance or weighting of each parameter. This weighting reflects the significance of each parameter in relation to others in the context of the project's environmental impacts. Let's understand with the help of example. Now, the following example where two factors, wildlife habitat in hectares and employment increase in jobs, for two alternatives are considered, will explain how scaling weighing method can be applied. In this example, the environmental factor data has been scaled to an index. 0 is worst and 1 is best. Now, scaling it was done by dividing the factor data by maximum values for both the alternatives, and two aggregation methods were followed. So this table illustrates the scaling and weighing method applied to evaluate two alternatives based on two factors: wildlife habitat preservation and employment increase. The process involves scaling the raw data, applying weights, and then aggregating the result. So from the image you can see now there are two alternatives, alternative 1 and alternative 2, and raw data is given for both the alternatives. So first of all we will go for scaling. Now how scaling is done? It is done by dividing the factor data by maximum values for both the alternatives. Like you are having two factors over here, wildlife habitat, employment increase. So first of all you will find out the scaled values. Now this is value for alternative 1, this is value for alternative 2. Among these both, this value is higher, so we will divide both the factor data by 10,000. So we will get scaled value. You can see 5,000 divided by 10,000, 0.5. Likewise 10,000 divided by 10,001. Then for employment increase also we will find out the scale values. So from both of these, this one is higher, so we will divide both these values by 5,000. So 5,000 divided by 5,000 will get 1 here. Likewise 3,000 divided by 5,000 will get 0.6 here. So now we have got the scaled values. Now we will combine both these scaled values 0.5 plus 1 and we will get the aggregate score. Over here we will combine both these values and we will get the aggregate score of 1.6. So when you will compare 1.6 with 1.5, so 1.6 is greater, means this alternative is preferred, means alternative 2 is preferred. Now this is the case when we give equal weights to both the factors. You can see over here we have given equal weights 1 1. At that time scale value we aggregated and we found out the score. Now second case is we have given different weights. For wildlife habitat weighted index we have given 0.2 weight, and for employment increase we have given 0.8 weight. So now we have to calculate the weighted values. Now how we will calculate it? We will calculate it by multiplying this wildlife habitat value with this weighted index, 0.5 into 2, 0.1, then 1 into 0.8, 0.8. Then we'll combine both these values, we'll get 0.9. Likewise, for alternative 2, we have to again calculate the weighted values. So 1 multiplied by 0.2 will be 0.2, then 0.6 multiplied by 0.8, it will be 0.48. Then we will aggregate these two values, 0.68. So in case of weighted values, 0.9 and 0.68 are the values. 0.9 is for alternative 1, 0.68 it is for alternative 2. So 0.9 is greater than 0.68. So in this case, alternative 1 will be preferred because of its higher weighted score. Questionnaire checklist. Now this checklist is prepared based on the set of questions which is designed to gather feedback from stakeholders, or which is designed to gather feedback from the public via public consultation. Questions may address stakeholders' awareness of the project, concerns about the potential environmental impacts, and opinions on proposed mitigation measures. It combines the structured format of a checklist with open-ended or multiple choice questions. It provides a standardized approach to gather and organize response from stakeholders. Now responses which you will get from the questionnaires, it will be typically compiled and analyzed using spreadsheets or another analytical tools. The analysis aims to assess the scale of impacts perceived by stakeholders and the relative importance they assign to different environmental parameters. Once the questionnaire is distributed and responses are collected, transferring the data to spreadsheets, it is a practical way to organize and analyze the information. By inputting the responses into the spreadsheet, you can calculate the scale of impacts and assign weights to different parameters based on public opinion. This approach allows for a systematic evaluation of the project's potential effects and provides valuable insights into the stakeholder perspectives. Using spreadsheets for analysis offers flexibility in manipulating the data, generating visualizations, and conducting further calculations as needed. It can help identify the pattern, trends, and areas of consensus or divergence among stakeholders. Ultimately, this information can inform decision-making processes and help ensure that the proposed project takes into account the concerns and the preferences of the public. Now, this is the example of questionnaire checklist. Now, this checklist helps in evaluating the potential environmental impacts of the proposed project. Each issue has corresponding questions that needs to be answered with yes, maybe, or no observation. Like, for example, for the first issue, noise, will the project increase the existing noise levels? This question assesses if the project will contribute to higher noise pollution in the area. Second is vegetation. Will the project change the diversity or productivity of species or the number of any species? This question evaluates the potential impact of the project on local flora, including changes in the species diversity and productivity. Likewise, other questions are there. So whatsoever answer will be there, yes, maybe, no observation. Accordingly, you can mark in the checklist. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of the questionnaire checklists? These checklists, they promote systematic consideration of a wide range of potential impacts by providing a structured list of environmental parameters or factors to consider. They allow for the concise summarization of effects, ensuring that all the relevant impacts are identified and evaluated. These checklists are among the simplest assessment methodologies in EIA, making them accessible even to stakeholders with limited technical knowledge. They summarize complex technical information into a format that is easily understandable by the experts, from different fields or decision makers who may lack technical expertise. They provide a preliminary analysis of impacts, which can be further refined in more detailed scaling checklists or other assessment methods. This initial insight helps in understanding the potential significance of impacts and in prioritizing further investigation or mitigation efforts. Information on the ecosystem, functions, and environmental parameters can be clearly understood through weighing methods, which assign relative importance or significance to each impact. Then there are certain drawbacks as well. These checklists, they typically do not include direct cause-effect links between the project activities and environmental impacts. This can make it challenging to understand the precise pathways through which a project might affect the environment. These checklists may be too general or incomplete, potentially missing specific impacts or details that are critical for the thorough assessment. The lack of detail can result in an insufficient understanding of the full range of potential environmental impacts. These checklists, they do not illustrate interactions between different effects, which can be crucial for understanding the cumulative impacts. By treating the impacts in isolation, the checklist's approach may overlook how different impacts influence one another. The same effect may be registered in multiple places under headings that overlap in content, leading to the double counting of impacts. The number of categories to be reviewed can be immense, potentially overwhelming the assessor and distracting attention from the more significant impacts. The identification of the effects often involves qualitative and subjective judgment, which can vary between different assessors and lead to inconsistencies. And the absence of quantifiable data can make it difficult to compare and prioritize the impacts effectively.